Good afternoon. My name is Hector Anaya, and I am the CEO of INDEVAL. We are thrilled to be here at the France Edelman Award Final. And we are pleased to have the opportunity to present our use of OR solving an important challenge faced by our industry. The result is a major development that has profoundly changed the way our business is conducted, and it could have a worldwide impact. We would like to begin with a brief video presentation of our company.
The securities industry maintains assets valued in the trillions of dollars in custody and processes securities market transactions in the trillions of dollars every day. These functions represent critical components, since securities infrastructures and their relationship to payment systems underpin the processing needs of each country's financial markets and their associated macroeconomic impacts. Securities transactions provide the liquidity necessary for countless market activities, including financing for entrepreneurial individuals and small businesses developing new and innovative products, corporations financing business growth, governments financing health and education, as well as supporting growth in savings vehicles such as mutual and pension funds. The principal stakeholders in these market infrastructures are financial institutions and their clients, both domestic and international, as well as public entities, such as central banks and government ministries. These market participants complete millions of transactions each day that require absolute confidence in their security and legal certainty. For decades now, financial institutions and investors have entrusted central securities depositories like INDEVAL with the safe custody and management of their securities assets. Increasingly, these securities have been immobilized or dematerialized by central securities depositories, utilizing advanced electronic systems, something made possible by the existence of the securities settlement systems, which provide the essential electronic link between the purchasers and sellers in the marketplace. These settlement systems are absolutely critical to the efficient and secure transfer of ownership resulting from securities trades. INDEVAL, Mexico's national central securities depository and security settlement system, provides innovative systems in support of its service offerings in the areas of safekeeping, custody, management, clearing, and settlement of equities, government, bank, and private debt securities. INDEVAL is also an active member of some important international associations, since it strongly believes that synergies that arise through this participation can generate great benefits to all the parties involved. Through the role it plays in these organizations and working groups, INDEVAL contributes in a meaningful way to the development of international standards and best practices for the world's securities markets. In its more than 30 years of operations, INDEVAL has made great strides in helping to cement the foundation of Mexico's financial market infrastructure and recognizes the critical role the organization will play in the country's continuing market development.
Our challenge today is to first explain the critical role of central securities depositories, because frankly, very few people outside the financial markets are aware of what we do. Our activities frequently go unnoticed, but are certainly critical to the efficient functioning of the markets. Second is to present the alternatives that CSDs have in order to accomplish their clearing and settlement responsibilities. And finally, to outline the way in which we created DALI, quite possibly the world's most innovative securities clearing and settlement system, using OR as its foundation. At INDEVAL, we are very proud of DALI. Very proud because we developed it from scratch using advanced OR techniques. Very proud because we were able to coordinate DALI's implementation in cooperation with the entire Mexican financial sector. Very proud because DALI settles efficiently over $250 billion in transactions each day. That's more than 70% of the value settled within the entire Mexican payment system. In just 5 days, DALI settles the equivalent of Mexico's annual GDP, which is the 13th largest in the world. And finally, very proud because DALI was implemented on budget and schedule. I would like to take just a moment to share with you the genesis of our OR initiative. Back in 2005, when we started this project, the adoption of international best practices was a subject which was top of mind for INDEVAL's board of directors. They also believe that our collaboration with the central bank would enhance the Mexican financial markets. After some initial discussions with the central bank, it became very clear that we share a vision, and a new strategic partnership was born. At INDEVAL, we were very aware of the contributions made by the central bank to the development of international best practices. In fact, Francisco Solis, who's here with us today, was member of the task force that developed the payment system principles and practices on behalf of the Central Bank for International Settlements. Together, we recognize the need of an additional partnership that would bring the technical and OR expertise required in the areas of process engineering, system design, optimization, and simulation. We selected the best technical university in Mexico, ITAM, to join the team because they possess the unique and critical set of skills which were required to the project. This created a great team with a combination of industry, government, and academia, committed and working together in close collaboration with a common goal: to deliver a world-class, state-of-the-art securities settlement system. At this point, I will hand off to Jaime Villaseñor, who will take a few minutes to give you an idea of the role of CSDs in the financial markets, and the role of INDEVAL in particular, as well as the context and environment in which OR was applied in developing our solution.
Thank you, Hector. Good afternoon. Central Securities Depositories, or CSDs, are widely considered to be the central hub of the securities market post-trade infrastructure, playing a mission-critical role. However, like with your local power company, their existence is largely taken for granted and usually goes unnoticed unless problems arise. There are two principal functions that are within the purview of a CSD. One is the provision of services related to the custody and management of securities retained on behalf of the financial community and investing public. The other core function of a CSD is the efficient settlement of securities transactions. The centralized and immobilized custody of securities allows the CSDs to use electronic book entry for the record keeping of holdings. This facility is essential for the efficient management of securities, making it possible for market participants to complete large volumes of transactions safely and efficiently. In relation to securities settlement, it is important to establish that settlement occurs when securities and/or funds are transferred between the accounts of the counterparties to a transaction. So, if an individual wishes to buy or sell securities, she instructs her financial institution, which, acting on her behalf, sends an instruction to the security settlement system to receive or deliver securities against payment. The security settlement system does this through an electronic book entry, modifying funds and securities balances simultaneously. As an example, assume that Bank A has bought 100 securities from Bank B for $500. This transaction is settled through a process referred to as deliver versus payment, which is an industry best practice and for the settlement of securities transactions. This industry best practice for deliver versus payment defines that the payment portion of the transaction be settled through funds administered by the central bank through a direct link between the securities settlement system and the central bank, such as would be the Federal Reserve in the case of the United States. The Bank for International Settlements has defined three models of deliver versus payment, or DVP, the first of them being Model 1, with real-time gross settlement for all transactions. In other words, each trade settles individually. The advantage of this approach is that the funds or securities associated with each transaction are immediately available to the counterparty upon completion of settlement. In our example, Bank A has received securities from Bank B, and Bank B has received the funds, but immediately. Now, assume that Bank A is not only buying securities from Bank B, but selling them to Bank C for $500 the same day. In the Model 1 DVP, the Bank A does not have funds or securities. If it doesn't have them, neither of the two transactions could be settled. Bank A would then need to borrow money to pay the securities to Bank B, and once it has received the securities, deliver them to Bank C in exchange for money. This transaction is costly and therefore not efficient. Therefore, Model 1 operates in real time and results in high liquidity, provided that initial resources are at hand, but is not efficient and normally fails to settle some transactions. However, it's quite simple to implement. Model 2 calls for real-time delivery of the securities and the net settlement of the related payment obligation at the end of the settlement cycle, but has no outstanding feature that needed to be considered. Finally, Model 3 involves the net settlement of both securities and payments at the end of the settlement cycle. This net settlement is derived through a process of netting, which involves an offsetting of obligations, reducing a large number of individual transactions to a smaller one to be settled. In our example, the two transactions get reduced to one transaction, in which Bank B delivers 100 securities to Bank C, and Bank C delivers the $500 to Bank B. In this case, Bank A is netted and does not need to resort to borrow money to fulfill the securities obligations, which is very efficient. While the most difficult to attain in its optimal form, Model 3 system makes the most efficient use of the available resources by netting all pending transactions and settling the resulting obligation, increasing the settlement rate. Unfortunately, the implementation of Model 3 is complex and generally involves a lengthy period of time in completing the entire settlement process and delays the release of funds and securities. The difficulty that CSDs face when choosing one of these two settlement models is balancing the trade-off in terms of the efficiency in funds and securities usage on one hand, and the ability to provide intraday liquidity through real-time settlement on the other. Thus, a very desirable outcome and our collective goal would be the development and implementation of a settlement system that includes the best of the models, namely, efficient management of resources through the netting of funds and securities, such as with Model 3. Since having a security settlement system that can function with minimum resource usage is invaluable when liquidity is scarce, such as in the event of heightened market stress. And also to achieve real-time or very near real-time settlement, as with Model 1, in order to meet the almost constant demand for intraday liquidity and improved risk management. In search of these desirable features, we faced a challenge directly related to the Model 3 settlement process, that being determining which transactions should be settled with the participants' available cash and securities balances. Overcoming this challenge was our objective when we initiated an operations research study in order to ascertain the feasibility of optimizing our processing. Now, Francisco Solis will explain the overall approach that was followed to confront this challenge.
Thank you, Jaime. From my point of view as a payment system overseer, a Model 1 with real-time settlement for both security transfers and payments has clearly superior features. Model 1 enables banks to convert securities into cash very quickly to meet their obligations and their clients and their counterparties in other settlement systems. This is a very useful tool for a central bank to provide intraday liquidity to support settlement operations. Model 1 is much simpler, as it does not require complex risk control mechanisms to deal with defaults. Finally, Model 1 settles operations earlier, thus reducing uncertainty and risk. However, as Jaime pointed out, Model 1 would fail to settle many more operations than Model 3, and I strongly agree that it is very important to efficiently use available balances to avoid failed operations. This is especially true in times of market stress when resource availability may be severely restricted. A Model 3 system that settles in near real time has all the advantages of Model 1. I will now describe how we design a clearing process that enabled DALI to be a near real-time Model 3. We are certain we could not have achieved this without OR. Consider what a Model 3 system has to do. Even in the much simpler case, when there are no cash constraints, one has to find a set of transactions with the largest number of securities that does not overdraw accounts. We can model this for each security negotiated as a binary program that has one constraint for each participant to ensure that securities balances are not overdrawn. This problem is equivalent to one frequently encountered in payment systems, where we solve it for funds rather than securities. We have not found an algorithm that consistently solves this problem quickly, and we have to make do with rather elaborate heuristics that solve the knapsack problem many times and find a good feasible solution. In a security settlement system, a heuristic algorithm must deal with many securities at the same time as well as cash constraints. This would take too long and yield poor solutions. Fortunately, we were able to find a way out. In payment systems, important legal principles prohibit partial settlement of a payment, and similar restrictions are not as prevalent as in security settlement systems, where acceptance of partial deliveries to facilitate settlement has become commonplace in markets around the world. After extensive discussion, the Mexican securities market participants were convinced to have some operations settled partially, most of them for only a few minutes, in order to improve overall settlement rates. With this, we eliminated all binary variables and got a much more tractable problem. Now, we can find an optimal integer solution with standard OR tools, and this solution is far superior to the optimal solution of the binary problem. The model I have presented so far does not include cash constraints, and we need that to achieve delivery versus payment. With these restrictions, we get an LP which can maximize, for instance, the value of the transactions to be settled. The solution may include values that are not integers, and since we cannot settle a fraction of a security, we round up the optimal solution of this problem, use these values as upper bounds for the variables, and disregard the cash constraints. We use a small fund to provide a buffer for the cash accounts. The model we use for DALI's clearing process is more complex, since it includes redemptions and repayments of credits granted by the fund. Professor Lascurain will now talk about the work undertaken by the ITAM team to incorporate this clearing model into the design of our new system.
Thank you, Dr. Solis. As systems designers, our main goal was to implement a world-class Model 3 system that would work in a continuous way and that would establish the state-of-the-art while attaining INDEVAL's organizational objectives. A new rule-based security settlement system was designed and tested by the team of ITAM and INDEVAL. The core of the new system is responsible for processing all the settlement instructions that INDEVAL receives from its participants. The settlement model admits transactions and then queues them to be processed by a novel pre-settlement module. This module determines whether the operation is settled immediately, goes through a clearing process, or remains in the queue with a pending status. It also determines how the clearing process is invoked or triggered. Operations that are only partially settled are returned to the queue for further processing. The pre-settlement module maintains a queue of operations awaiting processing. Each transaction type has a specific set of business rules that take into account the monetary value of the transaction as well as the balances of the accounts affected. The settlement module completes the settlement of the transactions through the simultaneous transfer of securities and funds into the respective participant accounts. The clearing process module selects a set of operations that can be settled using the available resources in order to optimize a specific objective function. As Dr. Solis explained previously, the application of linear programming model for clearing of operations was critical to the successful development of the new system, but it implied the specification of many unknowns that had not been addressed before. First, which objective function should be used? Is it better to maximize the value of the transactions or the number of securities to be settled? This is not a trivial question. Second, what events should trigger the clearing procedure? Is it the time between processes, the value or the number of pending transactions to be settled, or is it a combination of them? In addition, there exist business rules that have to be followed and international standards to comply with. In order to obtain a firmer grasp of the situation at hand, we decided to use another OR technique, namely discrete event simulation using historical data. Through simulation, our purpose was to create an environment capable of validating the behavior and feasibility of the design of the new settlement system. Our goals in using the simulation model were fourfold. First, to find a balance between the liquidity in the system and the time taken to settle operations, where a trade-off between the two variables was expected. Second, to enable an analysis of the advantages and limitations of using the pre-settlement rules as parameters. Our third objective was to measure the performance of the system under different configurations generated by changing the parameters and decision variables. And finally, to determine a set of values for the parameters that would allow the system to work effectively. The input data for each simulation experiment used actual settlement instructions and arrival times of the individual transactions, only changing the rules or parameter values between experiments. These experiments correspond to 48 scenarios that were derived from a combination of various parameter options based on the knowledge and experience of INDEVAL's experts and the historical data available, while trying to achieve near real-time settlement. This slide provides an outline of the scenarios used in the simulation. In brief, scenarios for the pre-settlement rules: all delivery versus payment and redemptions are sent to the clearing process, like in a perfect Model 3, or if funds are available directly to the settlement process, such as in Model 1. Scenarios for the objective function, to maximize the value or the number of securities to be settled. Scenarios for the triggering mechanism that allow for variations in the maximum monetary value, the maximum number of operations awaiting to be cleared, or the maximum time between clearings. Also, to measure the performance of the settlement system, 3 measurements were considered. First, the average settlement time. Second, the amount of money required to settle operations. And third, the product of the first 2 measures. A significant number of simulations were carried out using a trust fund of only $30,000. The results demonstrated very clearly that there is a trade-off between reducing settlement times and using more funds in the system, as expected. Furthermore, the best results for the third performance measurement were achieved with a Model 3 environment with an objective function optimizing the quantity of securities. It is very important to point out that the trust fund was never overdrawn in the simulations. Thus, via simulation, a Model 3 environment with near real-time settlement was experimentally tested and passed with flying colors. I would like to mention that DALI uses several of the features evaluated in the simulation, including the integration of Model 1 and Model 3 characteristics into a single settlement engine, an enhanced version of the new pre-settlement module that handles transactions with configurable rules, and the optimization criteria considering the LP models. In closing, from my perspective, the most important outcome derived from our design and simulation tasks was to provide the financial markets with the possibility of implementing a versatile, flexible, and highly efficient settlement process. Arturo Palacios, one of my best students ever, who was part of the ITAM project team and is now a manager with INDEVAL, will provide details related to the DALI implementation.
Thank you, Professor Lascurain. Having demonstrated the feasibility of the design of the system by simulating its functionality, we needed to build up the entire technological platform and operational environment that was needed for its implementation. With this objective in mind, a total business process redesign was carried out. Business process modeling notation, business rules, and an audit of compliance with relevant international standards were all embraced during this phase of the project. When this phase was completed, we started its development and subsequent implementation. There were, however, several challenges that needed to be overcome to achieve this end. First of all, we needed the support of the entire Mexican financial community, coupled with their comprehension of the benefits to be derived from DALI, the new system. This involved the coordination of all the direct market players, including financial authorities and more than 100 intermediaries, some of who were reluctant at first to change their operating procedures. Yes, it was very tough, but we did it. This represented a great challenge, but also a great opportunity, since we needed all the Mexican securities market stakeholders to understand how our operations research-based settlement engine worked, which was also not an easy task. We also needed to methodically plan the strategy we would use to replace INDEVAL's legacy system, in order to ensure the flawless functioning of DALI, mitigate the almost countless risks associated with the startup of any system with this level of criticality, and also to smooth the transition to the new operational scheme. All of this was essential, because there was no room for failure. Once the new system had been launched, there was no turning back. Going back to our power company example, imagine a blackout. Now imagine a similar service disruption involving the flow of billions of dollars to the whole market. Any errors in the implementation process could potentially have been catastrophic for the Mexican financial markets. All these challenges were tackled using specific courses of action. The first was establishment of an isolation process for INDEVAL's legacy system, which consisted of receiving all the transactions through a single entry point, using an industry-standard communication protocol based on ISO 15022. This same communication protocol would be used by the new system, and with this approach, it would be then possible to replace the settlement system without requiring our clients to make a single change in the way their systems interacted with us. The second course of action was a parallel testing program that allowed us to fine-tune the security settlement system. This program was divided in two phases. The initial phase involved processing in DALI all the transactions that had been registered in the legacy system the prior business day. This activity was repeated for each operating day for a period of 4 months in order to stress test the system and to ensure the consistency and accuracy of the results. The second phase consisted of an industry-wide parallel testing, which entailed the simultaneous processing of transactions in both the legacy and the new system. And this was accomplished by creating an online replication and transmission to DALI of the transactions received from the legacy system. For this purpose, we established a parallel financial environment in which all the Mexican securities market stakeholders provided fully operational and testing systems and working groups, verifying the daily processing of DALI over the course of several months in order to confirm its proper functioning and to fully understand the new settlement process. In parallel with these activities, we created and executed a nationwide coordination strategy that included the establishment of a steering committee and the provision of extensive training and information sessions involving hundreds of staff and senior management of every stakeholder organization. thanks to an effective strategy and execution, business process design, application of operations research tools, and software programming by Bursatec, coupled with 9 months of exhaustive daily tests, DALI was successfully launched on November 14, 2008. Being the first security settlement system that uses an OR-based engine and representing a major breakthrough for Mexico's financial markets. From that first day of DALI's operation, we have run this OR-based clearing and settlement process at least 270 times each and every business day. That amounts to more than 67,000 times a year, with every settlement cycle being mission critical to our business and to the functioning of the Mexican financial markets. Through INDEVAL's efforts, our participants have obtained immediate and tremendous benefits derived solely from the implementation and operation of DALI and its direct optimization of funds and securities usage. Now, I would like to leave you with a few important testimonials of people who have witnessed what we have accomplished.
As the world's leading subcustodian and clearing bank, Citi interacts with Central Securities depositories across all regions. In Mexico, Citi's Banamex unit has a close and symbiotic relationship with INDEVAL going back many years and is its single largest user. In the mid-1990s, INDEVAL implemented the real-time gross settlement system, RTGS, in Mexico, which substantially reduced systemic risk. However, as volumes increased, the liquidity requirements on the system went up, and that impacted the cost of participation for larger players, and for smaller players it became difficult to be a user of the system. Fortunately, INDEVAL implemented DALI, a new settlement mechanism, which was a clever solution to this problem. They leveraged operations research techniques to create an algorithm that optimizes settlement rates by picking up batches of pre-matched trades that have the maximum probability of settlement. In addition, they are able to run this settlement cycle continuously through the day. As a result of the deployment of this new algorithm, INDEVAL substantially brought down the liquidity requirements in the system. Furthermore, the collateral that was required as a result of the liquidity needs came down by 60%. At Citi, we look forward to the day when innovative solutions like DALI are deployed across the world and bring down systemic risk and costs for participants.
Nosotros en Chile hemos intentado mantener siempre tecnología de punta. Una decisión estratégica fue buscar optimizar nuestro sistema computacional. Se inició definiendo las características que necesariamente un nuevo sistema para el DCB debía tener, incluyendo a INDEVAL con su sistema DALI. Uno de los puntos que nos llevó a pensar que podría ser aplicable el modelo para Chile es su algoritmo de liquidación, el cual genera en tiempo real alta eficiencia en el uso de los recursos financieros de los intermediarios.
Through the application of operations research techniques, INDEVAL has solved a puzzle that has challenged central securities depositories and clearing corporations for years. With the development and implementation of DALI, INDEVAL has achieved as optimal level of balance between risk minimization and settlement optimization as I have witnessed in my 25 years of experience in securities clearing and settlement.
The severe global financial turmoil of the past few years has made clear how very critical the capabilities of the financial system's operational infrastructure can be. Being sure that you can properly clear and settle securities trades and the related real-time payments, along with efficiently accounting for and servicing the underlying securities assets, is an absolutely essential part of assuring stability and integrity in the global financial markets. The DALI implementation, recently successfully completed by ST INDEVAL, is an outstanding example of a financial infrastructure organization's success in meeting these challenges. INDEVAL's achievement is especially impressive since it involved a market-wide implementation encompassing Mexico's domestic and global equities, government and corporate bonds, and money market instruments. In implementing the new DALI system, INDEVAL successfully replaced its core settlement and securities servicing applications, integrating these with its central counterparty clearing services and central bank payment system, as well as with the systems of all of its financial participant banks and broker-dealers. As INDEVAL's U.S. equivalent, we processed $1.5 quadrillion last year through just these same types of systems and links. So we appreciate very well just how much of an achievement this represents. It is clear that INDEVAL followed a well-designed and disciplined process in delivering this major renovation of its core technology systems, and it leveraged state-of-the-art techniques throughout this very complex process. I would heartily agree that INDEVAL's work and achievement in the DALI implementation should be recognized for the excellent accomplishment it represents.
We were committed to this OR initiative, not only because we anticipated there will be benefits for INDEVAL, which there were, but also because we firmly believe that the results it would yield would be extremely positive for the Mexican financial market as a whole. We have been rewarded for our commitment with a system that has delivered benefits to market participants directly attributable to OR. Because our clearing and settlement module reduces liquidity requirements by more than 52%, financial intermediaries have saved at least $240 million in intraday interest cost just during DALI's 18 first months of operation, even considering a very conservative borrowing rate. Furthermore, since the implementation of DALI, the securities required in order to complete the settlement have been reduced by 26%, significantly reducing the overall settlement liquidity and settlement rates for our market. Market participants throughout the world have a renewed focus on closing exposure to their counterparties as soon as possible. The importance of this was graphically illustrated by the exposure which resulted from the failure of Lehman Brothers in November of 2008. That event highlighted the importance of settling open transactions as quickly as possible. In this context, DALI delivers continuous and near real-time settlement, which substantially reduce the average duration which trades remain unsettled on settlement date and the related counterparty risk. By integrating OR and IT, we have the combination necessary to bring to the market a solution that, from my perspective, it's almost magic. In just 1 minute in a recent settlement cycle, DALI settles more than $75 billion, generating more than 22,000 associated database records and more than 10,000 messages to our clients. As a result, we believe INDEVAL holds the unique distinction of being the only CSD in the world that has achieved near real-time Model 3 settlement, something that has, without a doubt, only been possible through the use of OR. This will certainly be applied broadly by other CSDs and clearing corporations as they become aware of our success. And yes, we agree that integrating OR and IT was the key in overcoming this challenge. Thank you very much.